Nick with Triple Nickel Outdoors. So I've been experimenting with a couple of different types of suspension options for my hammock, and right now I'm using Dutch wear spiderweb straps and have that attached to 1/2-inch mule tape. The way that I've secured it to my hammock is by using a knot called a Becket Hitch. It's a pretty well-known knot in the hammock community, ties really easy, and it holds weight well. One of the problems that people cite though when using this knot is that once it's loaded, it could be difficult to untie. Since I've been using this 1/2-inch mule tape, I haven't run into a problem with untying it. So I want to bring out a couple of different pieces of material, a couple different pieces of webbing. We'll tie it up, we'll tie the knot, and see if certain materials make the knot more difficult to untie once it's been loaded. So like I said before, this knot is called a Becket Hitch. You might also see it as a Becket Bend or a Sheet Bend. Even though it has a couple different names, it's still tied the exact same way. So I'm going to show you how to tie it the most secure way, and then I'll show you how to tie it when we're attaching it to a hammock. So basically, we're going to be using our continuous loop. You run the webbing or whatever other material you're using through the loop, and then pull it back and get it to roughly where you want it to be. Then what I do is I pinch it off, right like that, and then I'm going to make a loop, like this. So now what you do is you put the excess material through the middle of the loop, and then run it all through. So you got it like that. That pulls down, and that is your Becket Hitch right there, the most secure way to tie it. So now the problem with this is when we're using it in a hammock is that once we load this knot, it's going to be extremely, if not impossible, to untie. So what we're going to do is use something called a bite. You might also have heard the word slippery bee used. So all that is putting a bend in the rope so that way it can be untied easily. All right, so same thing. Got a continuous loop. It's running up, you get it to where you want it. Pinch it off. You make your loop in the same way, but instead of pulling the rest of the cord through, you make a loop out of the cord, and then that's what gets tied through. So the excess material is still running out the same side that it came through, and there's another loop in the cord. So now once this is loaded, and you put any weight on it, you can pull it out and it'll come right out. So when you're using a hammock, that's what makes it easier to tie and untie. Pinch it off, make your loop, a loop through the loop, up to the head, and then load it. So now it's loaded, untie it, just take the excess material, pull it out, and you're good to go. One other way I want to show you to tie it that is the most secure way is called a double Becket Hitch or double Becket Bend or double Sheet Bend. So same thing, run it through, make that loop, you run the entire amount through like that, and then again through the same loop the entire amount, and that extra turn gives the knot more security. Same thing though, this is going to be almost impossible to untie if we were to load this knot. So we are not going to load it. Now, I have seen the double Becket Hitch used for a hammock application. There's a different way to tie it where you're still getting a little bit more security without having to run it through the actual loop that we made twice. So tie it, get it to where you want it, pinch it off, you make your loop, and instead of going through the loop on your first turn, what we're going to do is we're going to go around the outside of the loop with the first turn. And what that does is it adds a little bit more friction so that the knot can't come undone as easy. So after that first turn, then you put the second loop through the first one like that, and that ties off. So that adds a little bit more security if you're using a type of material that you don't trust as much and you want a little bit added security to that knot. I don't want to say it's more difficult to untie, but just pull that down and that'll come out again. Come up, pinch it off, make your loop around the outside, then the other loop through the first one, pull it back to where you want it, load it, and that is your double Becket hitch. Okay, so that's how you tie it. Both versions. This is the regular Becket hitch. I'm going to load it, and then we will untie it and see how easy it is to untie. All right, so I want to show you this. So I had this other piece of the mule tape attached to the spider web strap, and I ran that down, and I had the Becket hitch tied in the knot, just a single Becket hitch. When I went into the hammock, I decided to bounce on it a little bit and to see if I could get as much loading on this knot. When I did that, there was too much force and it actually made the knot slip, and it ran down the mule tape and actually heated it up. Same thing on my continuous loop. You can see the amount of friction from when the knot came untied. It actually burnt it. So I don't know whether it was because of my weight and the added friction when I was bouncing in the hammock a little bit, but it caused so much friction that it actually broke the rope and burnt my continuous loop. So that is definitely something to note, because that's never happened to me before. All right, so now I'm going to see if I could reenact it, because I'm going to need to get a new continuous loop anyway. So I want to show you what I did and see if it does it on the second piece of mule tape. All right, so I'm starting to bounce. So yeah, it did the same exact thing. So I can only assume that the times that I've gotten to my hammock normally where it's not being shock loaded, the knot is able to hold my weight without any, problem with the amount of force that's being applied to it. The problem with this knot, when I started to shock load it, is it couldn't hold that amount of force. And in turn, you saw it slip. And on the other material, it slipped so much that it caused so much friction that it ended up ripping or ended up burning through the rope and burning my continuous loop. So that was definitely an eye-opening experience. So let me show you. So now we still have, I'm going to show you this now. Okay, so this is the double Becket. Around outside once, through, and loaded. I'm going to start bouncing and let's see if that slips or if that can hold it. I'm going to shock load, I'm going to jump on it a little bit. Jumping on it. So that held. So that extra wrap that we put into it gave it enough stability that it didn't break the material. I mean, you could see it tore right through that other strap. That was crazy. Now to untie, like I said, pull straight down the continuous loop. Oh, wow. All right, pull up. On this On this material, with this mule tape, it's easier to pull up to get it untied. Wow, this stuff is worn through. That was crazy. I want to do that one more time just to be sure. Up, pinch it, loop, around the outside, through the middle, loaded. Bouncing. Yeah, see all the friction? You can see on the... So any type of shock loading with this material does not look like it handles it well. I will say though that I have used it on a regular application and it's fine. So I'm not saying that this is a bad method, but it just happens to be that, you know, me trying to put a little bit more force on it caused a lot of abrasion. Same thing, I can't pull it down. Oh, a little bit slipping. Oh, it seems that it's easier when you pull it up to get the knot undone. That is the end of my mule tape. Wow. All right. So, I mean, this is why you test stuff out, I guess. All right, so we're done with that. Wow, that was nuts. Okay, now I'm going to take the mule tape off of these spider web straps, do the same thing, and attach the actual spider webbing to the continuous loop, do the loop, do the Becket Hitch with this, and see the results that we get from that. All right, so you can tell this is 1-inch Spiderweb 2.0 strap. It's a thin, lightweight webbing that Dutch sells on his site. It's a little bit, when you're using it, it kind of gets pinched down, but if you spread it out, it opens back up again over time. But when you're using it, just you gotta work with it. So same thing. Gonna run it through the continuous loop, pinch it off. Make that loop and then pull that and load it. All right. I didn't jump on it or anything, it just slipped right out. I'm wondering if the abrasion on this continuous loop is now making it more slippery. So we'll do the double. Around outside once, put that second piece through, load it like that. That's holding. All right, so that double held. Same thing. Pull down. It's a little difficult. Pull up. Let me do it again. It's got all my weight. That came undone easy by pulling it up towards the head end. Okay, so you saw that. It looked like using this spider web strap or this spider webbing, when it was run through the continuous loop doing a single Becket hitch, once again, I wasn't like bouncing like a trampoline, but I was putting some excess force and it did slip down. Doing the double kept it in place, and even though it was a little bit difficult to untie down the continuous loop, it seemed to come out easy when we came up the webbing. So we did that. Let me get another piece of webbing that we can use. So this is 1 inch, just standard nylon webbing. I got this from Dutch's site. I have another piece of flat webbing also that is similar in design to this, but it seems like it's made out of a different type of nylon or a different weave, because this is a lot thinner, or I'm sorry, not thinner. This is a lot like a softer material than the other webbing. Same thing, get it to where you want it. Pinch it off. We'll do a single first and then do the double. Sitting in it. Bounce it a little bit. So this webbing held. Let's see how it is to untie. All right, that came out. Do it again. That came out going down the continuous loop. And up. I have one more type of webbing. We'll try that out too. Okay. This is 1 inch webbing also, but like I said, it's a little bit rougher feeling than the other type of 1 inch flat webbing that we had. That was a little bit softer with the material. I just have this in a loop at the end, and we're just going to run it around the loop. Get it to where we want it. Pinch it off, around, through. Okay. Bouncing. Okay. That knot held. This knot held. Okay. So that does come out. Like I said, it takes a little bit of force, but it did come out. Let's try this with a double. Bouncing. All right, so that held too. That's good. And that came undone pretty easy. The continuous loop is shot. Wow. So just as another piece of advice, this is the other side of my hammock. I still have the spider webbing, but I have it running down to a whoopee sling, and then that is hooked up to my continuous loop with a whoopee hook. So this side was subjected to the same amount of forces that we put onto the other side where we're using the Becket Hitch, but I have no wear on my continuous loop. Using knots you can see how much friction the rope on rope caused and the damage that was caused from it. So that's something that I'm noting, and I'm going to make a determination whether I want to use that type of suspension. I mean, granted, I'm not going to be bouncing in it when I'm in my hammock, but just the fact that when shock loaded, that was the result. You know, it's good that we actually saw that, because now, you know, that could happen in the field for whatever reason. You know, maybe you were adjusting yourself, you ended up bouncing. That could be the result, so just keep that in mind. Okay, so let's go over what happened. We used 4 different types of webbing. We used the spider web straps, we used the mule tape, we used 1-inch webbing with a softer feel, and another 1-inch webbing, both flat webbing, that was a little bit rougher. I guess the biggest thing to take away was how much force is applied to the suspension when it is shock loaded. Not saying that that's a regular practice when you do get into a hammock or when you're using your hammock, but once again, I'm 225. Someone that might weigh more might need less force. Someone that weighs less, that's actually jumping around in it more, might create more force. So just be aware of that. I've used the mule tape countless number of times before this incident. I've never had a problem with it. But when an excessive amount of force was applied to it, you saw the result. So be aware. As far as tying the knot, it looks like using the double Becket hitch is definitely a more secure way to tie it. And you're not losing really any, there's not an excessive problem with untying it after it's been loaded. So I would probably recommend, if I'm going to use this knot as part of my suspension setup, I would probably use the double Becket hitch in that application. It seemed that sometimes, even though there was force that was needed to get the webbing out, it still wasn't impossible. It just took a little bit of force. So I'm not saying that I wouldn't use it because it's impossible to untie. It just took a little bit of elbow grease to get it out. That's pretty much all I got. Like I said before, I've used the mule tape suspension before. I've never had an issue with it, so I'm not shying away from using it. It's just a matter of what I finally end up going with. I think this hammock's going to be out of commission for a little bit until I can get Randy and Dion on the horn and get a new continuous loop for that other end. But it's a good thing we're not someplace in the middle of nowhere where these kinds of things happen to us. So that was good to see. All right, I'm going to clean up, get out of here. If you have any questions, feel free to comment. Other than that, this is Nick with Triple Nickel Outdoors. Get out there and hang.